Okay, so now we're back with part two for chapter two. Just like in class, I have my favorite beverage here. Um, okay, so with the play stage, Meat says this is generally play stage goes from 3 years old up to 6, 7, 8 years old. It depends, but in general. But the play stage is when young kids begin to actually uh, play at role taking, if you will. And this is generally a simple set of binary roles, role taking. In the play situation is usually spontaneous. Kids go out and play. They may, and the time limit is whenever they finish, right? So kids can play from a few minutes to all day long, like we did when we were kids. Leave early in the morning, and we'd play all day until dark. No time limits, no special rules or regulations set up. Generally, just simple role playing. So that might be cops and robbers. Playing army. Us kids, we had a whole division in our neighborhood. We had a big gang of kids, boys and females. Girls and guys playing army, and again, it's just spontaneous play. The good guys, the bad guys. Nowadays, through the media, kids, the surrogate parent of the television now because both parents are working. Kids pick up you can name it, whatever the heroes are on the media at this time. Power Rangers, it used to be the Ninja Turtles, and God knows what else. I don't even know what they're. I'm sure there's something there that kids emulate. But if you look at changing characters in the media, but if you look at the content, it's generally a lot of times the same. It's the good guys against the bad guys. We couldn't even begin to count how many sitcom television drama shows and movies are based on the good guy, the bad guy dichotomy. But kids will play at these, and there's no rules. It's just a simple sort of playing these dualistic simple roles. But for me, it's a very, very important step towards developing a full-fledged social self, making it possible for us to interact in a mature society, if you will. That they're actually stepping outside their selfish space and stepping into an actual social role. Because as we'll see as we're studying, where the individual gets connected into society is through the playing of roles and then taking on statuses. And as we get older, those statuses become more complex. And we get tied into society, and our identities get caught up in these statuses that we occupy. So that's the link between the individual, social psychology for us. That's the link is between the individual and the statuses that we play. So in this case, then the kids are just stepping into these social statuses, nurse, soldier, playing these little parts and role taking. They're like on a stage. They're playing these parts, right? From what they have seen in society so far. And usually another concept that's important is that at this stage, usually the play is significant others, those that are most important people in their environment, parents, siblings, but also significant others in terms of cultural heroes, if you will, good guys, bad guys, this kind of thing. So, for example, when I was a kid growing up, as I said, we had a gang of kids in our neighborhood, and almost on a daily basis, we would play army together. We would have battle fights, and we had the neighborhood girls as well. And as we got a little older, I mean, we had this big playhouse in our backyard, and we would. So the boys and the girls, we would divvy up the roles, and the young girls were the nurses, and we had our little doll. We had this plywood doll house, if you will, and had a cot in there. And so the nurses would stay in the doll house, and we boys would be out in the yard, a big gang of us, and we would be playing. soldier. Now, the rule we had devised, and I guess you can see the males devised the rule that when one of us got shot, then the girls would come out and drag us back into the dollhouse. And there was some magic involved. The way in which we survived getting shot, the girls had to give us a little kiss. And when they would kiss us, that would heal us, and then we would run back out and start fighting again. Of course, you see what those little characters were up to. So they would give us a little kiss on the cheek or something, and we would come back to life and run back out into the yard. And so we did also, while we were taking the role of others, we were also manipulating it a little bit. And, it was all in good fun. But Mead says that in the last stage, and this runs anywhere from, 8 years old to 12 years old. Some kids get it quicker than others. Mead calls this the game stage. And for Mead, this is the final stage of the development of the fully functioning social self. Now, from the sociological, from the symbolic interaction and social psychological standpoint, the self is not born, is not given to us at birth. There may be a human life, but the self, in terms of the social interactive self, has not developed. And that it takes, the maturation, it really takes a good bit of time, up until about 12 years old, before we begin to develop the fully functioning social self, if you will. And what we mean by the social self is that self that makes it possible for us to engage the community, because we've internalized the norms and the values not only of our local milieu, our family, peer groups, but of the society as a whole. We know we've internalized, for the most part, many of the do's and don'ts of the society, such that we can go out into most situations and interact with others in novel situations. For example, coming to college and having to interact with professors and maybe senior students, and you already have a ability to do that because you've pretty much have internalized the do's and don'ts of the educational system. You know what's required of you for the most part. It's not a big mystery to you at this point. So for me, that's the fully functioning human self. You're able to rotate, to play on a team. So let me get back to the example. So for me, again, from 7 or 8 years old up to about 12 years old, the game stage. The game is we use a metaphor of playing sports, and so let's take the little league baseball team. But in the game stage now, it's not just willy nilly playing any time of the day. It's not spontaneous. There's a place and a time to be. So practice will be at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It takes place at the baseball diamond at the school, right? Nowhere else. So you got to be there on time. And then the other really important aspect is not just play that's spontaneous, it's rule-bound play. There's rules to the game that have to be learned. And for me, this ability not just to rotate in terms of simple dualistic roles, but to be able to take the role in a more complex fashion, where we're able to take our role in combination with understanding the role requirements for everyone else on the team. For me, that's complex role taking. And for me, while there's other things that may distinguish us from other species, it's this ability to complexly rotate that is uniquely human. We don't see this with any other species, this ability to complexly rotate. And that is, so let's just take, for example, and there's many examples you can use, but let's just take the example of the Little League baseball team, or let's take the T-ball team, if you will. And, the first day that the coach comes out, he puts all the kids out there in their respective positions on the outfield, all the team out on the field. Each one is in their place, first baseman, second, third base, outfielder, pitcher. Of course, don't have a pitcher in T-ball, but anyway. So the next thing is that the Coach comes up, he hits the ball. He takes his baseball bat, hits or she takes and hits the baseball, and the ball goes out in the outfield. And what happened? What generally happens with the first day on the team, right? All the kids go running after the baseball, right? They don't know to stay on their respective base and wait to see what happens next, right? They've been so used to just playing spontaneously. Everybody gets running after baseball. Coach calls them back. No, 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 you don't do it that way. Come back, get back on your positions. Don't leave your position when the baseball's hit out. So from there, so we have to really, in many ways, give it to these coaches that they're doing a great service, not just occupying the time of our young children, but teaching them something that's important in becoming a full-blown human being. So over time, then the kids learn. When I'm on the first base, and there's a person on the third base. There's a batter that's run to third base, and the ball is hit to the shortstop. The ball is hit, and it comes to the shortstop. What's the next thing that's going to happen? How do I coordinate my behavior? What happens now in this situation? So I have to know my role, but then I have to rotate with the third baseman. I have to rotate with the catcher. I got to rotate with the shortstop, and bringing out a double play, if you will. So we internalize that in a complex fashion, and so that we can get a double out. The ball can be thrown to first base, and I can throw home, right? And we get a double out. Same thing with a triple out. You've seen baseball teams do this, and when they do it correctly, it's like it's like watching ballet dancers. It's just pulled off perfectly. And then other times it goes awry and doesn't work out so well. But when it happens smoothly, it really, it looks like it's natural. It looks like it's something that's made it looks easy to do. But really, it's a very complex, uniquely to humans, to be able to rotate in this fashion. Some kids catch on to it faster than others. And I guess this might be why some kids drop out of organized sports, is that they have a hard time being able to coordinate their roles with the others on the team, for example. But again, this is just he uses the ball game, the ball team, as just a metaphor of society itself. So everybody on the team in that situation, you've learned about your role. Let's say it's a first baseman. You've learned your role in relation to all the other team members out there on the field, so that you can coordinate your behavior, because you can rotate with each one of them. You know what's expected of them, and then in certain situations, what we need to do and coordinate our behavior to bring this off. So then you can transpose that scenario to adult life. Many other situations at school, going to classes, your interaction with other students, with professors, with administrators, and then especially going in terms of your work career. You have to know what your role is in relationship to all the roles in your faculty, for example. If you're a teacher, if you're working in a factory, you got to know what your role is in relation to others on the line in making some product and how it's done together, and coordinating your timing. And for me, this is again is just unique to human beings to be able to do this, and this is what makes us human, really, after all, is this ability to. It makes it possible, symbolic interaction. It makes it possible for us to coordinate with each other in ongoing negotiations of social realities, and to be able to rotate is so important as we negotiate our time together in getting the work of society done. Requires this ability to be able to complexly rotate. Some people aren't able to, because maybe they have certain types of genetic problems, disabilities that make it impossible for them to complexly rotate. In our in our discipline, a person that has extreme learning deficiencies, capabilities, we call that a person without symbols. They're not able to manipulate symbols well enough to interact in a normal fashion, quote unquote, with people on an everyday basis. And so Mead's theory of self-development is very important sociologically. It's very sociological in its underlying assumptions that the self is developed from the outside in. It's a process of socialization. Just one quick another example of this, because at the game stage, another important concept here is the generalized other, and the generalized other is the if you will, generalized other is the community of the moral community that we're socialized into, and it's the do's and the don'ts, the rights and the wrongs of the society as a whole. It's the community as a whole. So when we've internalized the rules and regulations of the ball game and learned to role take in that situation successfully, we've internalized, for me, the generalized other. And we know what we have to do in terms of our interactions with everybody on the team, the community, if you will. Well, transpose that then to larger other social situations and even in terms of our whole society, and the internalization of society into your mind is the generalized other. So the best example of this would be when you're a little infant, you're a little kid. When you spill milk on the floor, your mother gets upset at you, and so the little kid learns that when I do this, mom gets upset or dad gets upset. Of course, then they may do it intentionally to manipulate attention from the parents, but for now, it's simply spilling milk on the floor is something mom doesn't like. Then a little later, when they're in elementary school, they go to the lunchroom and they spill the milk on the floor. All of a sudden they find out, well, not just mom and dad, but the teacher doesn't care for it either. I got punished today. I had this. I didn't get to go to recess because I spilled milk on the floor and the teacher got upset, kind of thing. Now it's not just mom and dad; it's also the teacher. And then as life goes on, you find out you begins to dawn on you that if you take liquid or milk in any public situation, for the most part, and you spill it out on the floor, if you come to class and you take your energy drink or your coffee or milk, if you haven't, and you pour it out on the floor, then you know that I'm going to get upset, and probably the students around you are going to get upset also. Of course, you might manipulate that situation and say, "Oh, that was a mistake. I'm sorry. I knocked it off." But you get where I'm going with this. At that point, at that third stage, Mead would say that that's the generalized other. You've internalized the generalized other so that you know that you can't do that anywhere. You can't spill milk or spit on the floor anywhere because it's not just a no-no in terms of mom. It's the whole society. It's a norm of the society. So I can go anywhere and behave myself, right? Because I know I shouldn't do this, and it's just one example. In our repertoire, that's mostly subconscious. We have a lot of it. We know what to do and not to do in social situations because it's looked down upon. I'm sure you can be creative to think of many kinds of behaviors that would be looked down upon. It would not be acceptable in any social situation, or maybe in some situations it would be, but not in many others. So that's a good example of the Mead's notion of the generalized other. Lastly, Mead also talks about the I and the me. And the I and the me are really internal processes, internal voices that works, and that we talked about society's constraints and then our ability to say no. And that's really related to the I and the me. And here's where Mead really did. He doesn't talk about it. I know he borrowed this from Freud's theory of the superego, the ego, and the id. So for me, there's two voices that we all have that's going on internally all the time. Most of the time, we're just not conscious of it. You may be after you learn more about this, but There's the I and the me. Me would say that the I is that aspect of ourself that's the creative child. Uh, has to do with our spontaneity. Also, it has to do with our sexuality. There's both positive sides, creative sides, but it's also the negative side. It's the violent side, the knee-jerk reactions we can have, the angry child, the one that can be possibly a killer at some point, or somebody that would assault someone. So Mead sees both positive and negative sides, but the I is that spontaneous, creative energy that we have within us. It's that voice in us that's a lot of times knee jerk, but it says, "I want this, I want that. I got." You see something, oh, I don't have the money, but I need to buy that, and blah blah. It's that sort of compulsive side, if you will. All of us have that side in us. Mead says that the me side of the self, that other voice, is the generalized other. The me is the internalized, generalized other. It's the voice of society. Sometimes we can, in psychoanalytic terms, it's called the internal parent. And that internal parent, the me, puts the brake on the I. It says, don't do that. Stop what you're doing. That's bad behavior. If you do that, you're going to get in trouble. Of course, this can happen within a blink of an eye. But Mead says that this is what makes society possible, is that generalized other, the me, is able to manage and negotiate with the I. And so that the me you can think of as society's social constraints. You can also think of it as Freud's superego, wherein the internalized parent, if you will, the person there's voices in your head that tells you, don't do this, don't do that. Why did you do that? And sometimes it can be quite nasty towards our own self, with this voice of this we try to conform to or don't conform to. We get in trouble with the me. But the me is there. That's me is society's brakes on our human behavior. Hold on just one second. I got to hook my computer up. I always try to be ready for any contingencies with this, the kind of thing, but before it's all over, somebody's going to probably be knocking at the door, so I better get going. But lastly, so the me is the generalized other that's the do's and don'ts in our heads in society, and the id is that reactionary self. So that if you make bad on your first exam, you get all you're all angry. And you find this out, and all of a sudden you curse your professor, and maybe you throw a book at them, right? Out of your me was either in criminology, in criminal justice, they talk about the social control theory, people's ability to control themselves, and that some people lack that ability. From our standpoint, from the sociological social psychology or interactionist perspective, that lack could be a lack of socialization, a strong generalized other. Since some people have lacked that socialization, so that they're more compulsive in their behavior, gets them in trouble. Of course, we've all probably gotten in trouble at some point in our lives because of our not listening to the me. But most of the time, the me will interject and will, sometimes in a split second, we say, I'm so mad at that professor, I'm gonna say something right now, but the voice said, don't do that. Hold back, because if you do that, you're going to get expelled from university. You're going to lose all your credits this semester. You may not be able to come back for a year, right? So don't do that. And 9 times out of 10, it works. You're going down the road and you're having a bad time with a driver in front of you, and you want to bump them in the back, but then you think, don't, the me stands and says, don't do this, don't do this. You're going to get in trouble if you do that. There's going to be heavier consequences. Just take it. But then there's other times when, on the other side of the equation, when we don't conform, right? We hear the me saying, "Don't buy that. Come on, that extra money from your financial aid, that's supposed to keep that money for next semester." But man, I sure did want to buy this new jacket, or man, that computer. I love that new telephone, that iPhone. Man, I'm sorry this time around, Mr. Me. I'm sorry this time around. I've got to, or Mrs. Me. I got to. The eye's got to have its way, and I'm gonna buy this telephone. And you'll pay the consequences later. It happens to all of us. Don't feel bad. It's not. Again, we're not 100% predictable. If we were so, then sociology would be an exact science, just like biology and other hard sciences. But we're not. So we base. Here's one thing to remember about sociology in general is that we base our claims on we base it on probabilities. What's the probability that this might happen or not happen? And why do we do that? Because human beings are not 100% predictable. And that's because, in many instances, that's because the I exists. And I can say no to the me. And that's what, in many ways, that's what makes us interesting. It also makes it possible for us to change uh, our own lives over time, to inject new values and new beliefs. The old me can get sort of worn out, and we need some new injections of what we have to do a house cleansing sometime, and say, I think this is fine. I'm get rid of this notion that that's bad, and it may turn out to be good after all. So the me is not something that's fixed in place in time. It changes as well over time, as our values and beliefs change through time. But still, it's an important and very insightful concept, the I and the me. Again, I think borrowed a little bit from Freud, but nonetheless, it's an important sociological notion. Uh, and I think that in terms of, make sure that you go over your definitions. And before we take our exams, we'll do some definition reviews. I'll help you do that in terms of the exams. I always give you you can ask students from my other classes. I always give you great test reviews. Once you've read all this material, make sure you read these chapters, because these tests are based on familiarity. So the more familiar you are, a lot of times we learn things from reading a chapter. We take in information subconsciously. You see it on the test, and you have it because you read that material. But I do give very close readings on the exams, and very good test reviews. So we will go over some of the concepts here before the first exam. So anyway, go ahead and finish up chapter 1 and 2, and we'll be doing our readings together next time. I've learned not to speak dates and days in my videos, because many times I'll use these same videos again in another class. And so I've learned my lesson about saying tomorrow this will be due, and students are pulling their hair out saying, I don't remember you saying anything was due. So I try to avoid that now with my videos. But I'll see you guys real soon, okay? All right. Have a good day.